Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound is a tabletop role-playing game published by Cubicle 7 in 2020. The title is quite a mouthful, so let me just start by breaking it down. Warhammer started off as a tabletop war game in 1983 by Games Workshop in the UK and has expanded over the years into novels, video games, and role-playing games. In 2015, in an effort to reinvigorate their core Warhammer wargame, Games Workshop launched Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar replaces the old Warhammer game, which had reached 8 editions, and now Warhammer Age of Sigmar acts as their flagship fantasy wargame. If you want the latest and greatest Warhammer miniatures and lore, at least at the time of this recording, it's going to be Warhammer Age of Sigmar stuff. So this video is reviewing Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound, a 350-page tabletop RPG that fleshes out the Age of Sigmar universe with an eye on individual heroic adventure. Just a quick word about the sponsor for this video, Arcknight, the creator of flat plastic miniatures. Like most people in the hobby, I collect minis, but they take up a lot of space. Arcknight creates these super tough flat minis and spell effects, and even though my collection of them is now swelling, they can still fit in a single slim folder. Their spell effects have the 5e spell details written on the edge, which I think is nice if you're playing 5e, but obviously the spell effects can be used with any rule set. These assets hit a sort of sweet spot for table play, I think, being precise and evocative like 3D stuff, but also ridiculously portable. I'm a huge fan. Thanks to Arcknight for sponsoring this video. You can find all the links to their stuff in the description below. Now, back to the review. It's super tough to try and summarize the mythology of Warhammer. If you look closely enough at any given aspect, there's a bottomless pit of detail and discussion. I'll just try to briefly summarize what it says in this book. In the first age, the Age of Myth, the gods and the creatures of the mortal realm all lived in relative harmony. But then the god of chaos slipped into the mortal realm and caused war between the races of man, elf, Duardin, and some others. Thus, the Age of Myth ended. The gods themselves began to turn on each other, and their parliament of gods fell apart, leading to even more destruction. It's here in the story where Games Workshop killed off the so-called Old World, the original Warhammer setting, and the setting entered the Age of Chaos. This is where the god king Sigmar fled the mortal realms and locked the realm gates behind him. Sigmar, by the way, is one of the oldest gods and is always looking out for the mortals as best he can. He is a paragon of order in the war between order and chaos. So what Sigmar did after retreating to his home realm was build up an army of mortals and immortal beings. After many years, he launched a counterattack on the forces of chaos back in the mortal realms and managed to build up some gleaming new cities. But Nagash, the god of death, had been building up a sort of super weapon for thousands of years, and it sort of triggered accidentally, unleashing death magic across the realms. This event is called the Necroquake, where all the dead rose up and put the entire new world or worlds at risk. Sigmar has very few options left at this point. One of them is an ancient order of warrior who is spiritually and bodily bound to each other in a small group, a group of, say, 3 to 5 players. Due to their binding, they heal faster, hit harder, and live forever as long as they don't die in battle. But they are sworn to fight the creeping death, chaos, and destruction across the realms. This binding of warriors are the Soulbound, and you are one of them. Let's talk about quote-unquote Soulbound characters for a second, because I think it's one of the coolest features of the game's theme and mechanics, and I think it's appropriate that they named the whole game Soulbound. As a Soulbound character, you are tied to everyone else in your party by a painful, sometimes deadly, but not for you, one-time ritual. This link amongst the party accomplishes a few neat things. One, it gives everyone a reason to work together, both in the meta and in the story. You're basically forced to skip the whole you meet in a tavern scene. 2, it rationalizes the group's metacurrency that you all share, which I'll explain later. And 3, it explains your superhero status and power. So about that, this game is about teams of champions. It starts high level and it ends there. There's no slow building up a character's skills and attributes across sessions here. Let's look at the character creation step by step to see what I'm talking about. 1, choose your archetype. There are 23 archetypes in the book, and they determine your species, of which there are 5. The 5 species are humans, Stormcast Eternals, who are, quote, forged from mortal souls, alloyed with the celestial energies of the cosmic storm, and beaten into the living weapons of Azir, upon the anvil of apotheosis. They look like humans, but can be up to 9 feet tall. They are in many ways like an analog to the highly engineered Space Marines in the Warhammer 40k setting. They are the poster child army for the Age of Sigmar brand. Then there are the elf. They're like elves. Rare, arrogant, elegant, pointy-eared. The Dwarden are a stout dwarven race who are masters of metal and stone, but often quite a lot more, like steampunk tech and golden fire runes. The Sylvaneth are like the Kroot in the Warhammer fantasy setting. That's not to be confused with Groot, or maybe it is. You get a mechanical bonus depending on your species, but again, you don't necessarily choose your species directly. You choose your archetype. Each of the 23 archetypes comes with starting core attributes and a core skill, talents, and equipment. There's another cross-section here called factions, which is species specific. You see this same phenomenon in the Warhammer Wrath and Glory RPG. All this faction stuff makes perfect sense if you're familiar with the war game, but if you're coming into it fresh, this faction stuff will take a minute to fully absorb. And by minute, I mean hours of reading. Just in case you were wondering, this is the faction list from the underlying Age of Sigmar war game, listed under the 4 armies of Order, Chaos, Death, and Destruction. At the time of Soulbound's release and this recording, the war game is in its 2nd edition. You can see at a glance that this RPG allows you to play only from within the army of Order, who are more or less the good guys of the setting. The archetypes themselves are cool. They all have very exotic names, and there's a lot of flavor text to each one that firmly couches it into the setting. Yet, due to the simplicity of the game's rules, each archetype fits on a single page. 2. Determine your attributes. This game's mechanics are pretty simple. It's a D6 dice pool, and you only have 3 core attributes, mind, body, and soul, which range from 1 to 8. These 3 numbers determine a bunch of secondary attributes. The number itself represents the number of D6s that you'll throw on a related test. 3. Sort your skills and talents. Each archetype has starting skills and talents. If you have any training points in that skill, then you add that many D6s to a related test. If you have any focus points in a skill, then add that many points to a die result. Talents are special features that affect the mechanics of your character in one way or another. Divine magic in this game, or miracles, are treated as talents. If you have the blessed talent, you can pick from 5 universal miracles and 25 god-specific miracles depending on which god your blessed talent is affiliated with. 4. Choose your equipment. Your chosen archetype will guide you on this. The equipment section of the book is not very exotic or creative at first. Then it hits you with this crazy cool section on Caradron equipment, sort of like dwarven machines that run on so-called ether gold. I will say it's kind of sad to see so many interesting weapons and items limited to just a few archetypes. There are also Fire Slayer runes, another class of items, if you want to call them that empower 3 other Dwarden archetypes. Another interesting aspect of equipment is the game's currency. Instead of coin, your character has a liquid called Aqua Gyranus, a sort of life-giving water that can purify land or heal wounds, as well as be traded for goods. 5. Add detail. The book provides a decent number of sample names for each species and faction. It's here that I'd like to address the elephant in the room. I am mispronouncing all of these names. I don't know if anyone on the internet knows how to pronounce all this stuff. There's no pronunciation guide in the book, but maybe one day Cubicle 7 can set the record straight somewhere. 6. Sort out your party. Each party, or binding, is asked to write down some short-term goals as well as some long-term goals. These actually have some mechanical bearing on the game because there are hard rewards for achieving these goals. It's also really nice on the role-playing side of things for the table to have some concrete goals. Since your characters start off super amped up, most likely for a one-shot or suicide mission of some sort, there's no point in just trying to accumulate wealth. This system of goals is the perfect solution and does make things a lot more interesting. 7. Bring your character to life. The book provides 10 questions that a player can answer to flesh out their character. 8. Put on the finishing touches. Calculate out all the secondary attributes. I'm not going to go over each of these specifically because this video is already going too long, but needless to say, they are all related to combat, and they are pretty straightforward mechanics-wise. As far as leveling up in this game, the system is simple and small in scope. You can only level a skill up to 3, meaning 3 extra dice on a check, and core attributes themselves only go up to 8. Combat is surprisingly streamlined for a game inspired by a war game with crunchy and complicated battle rules. First of all, the default rules in Soulbound don't use distances, they use zones. Zones are just arbitrarily drawn areas of a scene meant to simplify combat and keep things moving along. If you want to attack something with melee, you have to be in the same zone, and for each turn, you can move anywhere in a zone or to another zone plus one action. To attack, you are usually either using your melee rating with your body weapon skill rating, or your accuracy rating with your body ballistic skill. Let's say my Hag Priestess wants to slash a Maw Crusher with her sacrificial blade. She's got a melee rating of good versus the Maw Crusher's defense rating of great. You have to refer to the almighty ladder to see how far removed one rating is from the other. My Hag is good, the Wyvern is great, so that's one step lower, which means the difficulty number or target at which my dice need to hit or be above is 5. The Hag Priestess has a body attribute of 2 and a weapon skill of 2, which means we roll 4 dice. What's interesting here is that the dice roll will serve as both the to hit check as well as the damage roll. So with a DN of 5, this roll has 4 successes. But before I count that as 4 damage, I have to subtract the target's armor. The Maw Crusher has 3 armor, which negates 3 of the 4 damage that she landed. That 1 damage that she did is subtracted from the enemy's toughness, which happens to start at 20 in this case. That's basically how combat works, but things do get more complex with the Metacurrency. I'm not sure where the tradition started, but Cubicle 7 game designers love Metacurrency. In this game, there is Metal, which is a fast spending and fast replenishing pool that each PC has. You can do the following things with it. Metal is pretty crazy and is a large contributor to why Soulbound is so over the top and feels like a superhero game. But then there's Soulfire. Soulfire is a point pool shared by the party, and you don't get that many. Any one player can spend one, and the effect is pretty extreme in most cases. Recovering Soulfire points is relatively difficult, but it can't be overstated that these points are extremely powerful. By default, the party or binding starts with as many Soulfire points as there are PCs, minus anyone who's a Stormcast Eternal. The GM can also increase a party's max Soulfire pool and replenish Soulfire points for basically any reason. There's also a Doom track that gets ticked up and down for various reasons, including when a player spends Soulfire against the wishes of their party. Doom is a pretty squishy concept where the GM is supposed to increase the gloominess of the environment and maybe the toughness or frequency of the enemies as Doom increases. There are a number of specific named activities that a PC can partake in during downtime, some that require rolls of the dice and others that are more roleplay based. Participating in any of these activities gives advantages to the PCs, ranging from reducing the Doom level to gaining new spells to increasing certain skill ratings. When you consider all the cool things that the PC can get from these downtime endeavors, it would be a crime for any GM to skip over them and merely go from encounter to encounter. You cast spells in this game by throwing a mind channeling test, which means you take your core mind attribute number plus any points you have in the channeling skill and throw that many d6s. Your target number of successes depends on the spell. So for example, the Amber Spear's difficulty number is 5-2. That means it's a success if you get 5 or higher on the die and you need 2 successes. If you roll up extra successes, it's called an overcast, and each spell has specific overcast effects. If you fail the casting roll, you have to roll on the price of failure table, which punishes you more depending on how badly you failed. You basically either take damage, lose a turn, or if it's really bad, lose all your hit points, gain a mortal wound, and summon a raging chaotic force called an endless spell that appears in your zone. I think it's worth noting here that this is a critical mechanic in the game in terms of theme and feel. Basically, magic is dangerous, even though you are a super champ PC right out of the gate. A spell could backfire and kill you instantly, because it's Warhammer after all. The world is dark and magic is dangerous. There are 10 simple general spells in the book, and 10 spells for each of the 8 lores of magic. The whole setting of Age of Sigmar is broken into 8 realms, and the 8 lores correspond thematically to these realms. This is a straight port from the Warhammer fantasy roleplay setting, where most of the magic is allegedly derived from 8 colors, or rather, magic forces embodied by 8 different colors. So I personally found the most fun and interesting part of this book was the lore section. The beginning of the book paints the setting with some very broad strokes that are frankly a bit confusing for a noob like myself. But then, in the setting section of the book, they zoom in and actually explain everything. As the story goes, there used to be one world, and it was where the last Warhammer setting took place. It basically blew up and scattered magical world seeds that sprouted into 8 spheres or realms. These realms are described as infinite, so we're talking about lofty, epic scales here. Each of the realms embodies a certain theme and type of magic. Azir is the only realm not dominated by the forces of chaos and the undead, but the god Sigmar continues to try and change that, hopefully with the help of your PCs in this game. The book goes all in, describing life in the realms, safety, survival, entertainment, and then it dedicates 2 pages to each of the realms separately. It's a fun read and probably a must-read for hardcore Sigmar fans. Oh, and all of the realms are interconnected by realm gates, which are mysterious magical portals, large and small, that are kind of anywhere the GM wants one. Most of the realm gates have been hacked and will lead to the Realm of Chaos, a 9th realm, which serves as the source of chaos powers. All the jumping through realm gates and traveling from plane to infinite plane is definitely a major feature of the theme of this game. This is the highest of high fantasy. There's this one continent in the realm of Akshi, the realm of fire, called the Great Parch. This stretch of land has seen a number of the milestone events of the setting and acts as a kind of setting all its own. It's treated with extreme detail and has its own section in the book with everything you could ever want to know about the place. Since it's all fleshed out, it's a good place to have your one-shot or to start your campaign. The setting takes its gods very seriously, since the gods are like the field generals in this vast, sprawling war of order versus chaos. The section on religion doesn't have a drop of game mechanics, but seems like an extremely important thing to read. It details 14 gods, most of them sitting on the evil side of the spectrum. It's a pretty dark pantheon. This game's creators tap directly into the Age of Sigmar wargame's treasure chest of factions and stat out much of what you would see on any wargame table. There are essentially 6 types of creatures in the Bestiary, cross-divided into 5 categories of power. Most are statted with some fearsome attacks. You're not going to see as much battlefield synergy with these creatures as you would in the wargame, such as area buffs and the like, but you'll find a huge range of enemies in terms of ferocity and ability, as well as just visual variety. Okay, so here are my thoughts on Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound. Cons. Already leveled up. There's really almost nowhere to go for the players in terms of improving one's character and gaining power. If you look at the starting skills and abilities, then look at the rate of progression, PCs are already superheroes. And that's cool, I guess. It makes for the perfect one-shot. I would suggest that if you wanted to run a longer running campaign with this book, look in the GM toolkit section of the book on ways to tone down the power levels. It should be doable. Names. The game is wildly creative and is born of a huge IP with a lot of great writers behind it, but still it would be cool to have a pronunciation guide in the book. This seems kind of petty, but I think overly exotic names can really deter new players and GMs who might already be overwhelmed by a deep setting. Pros. Deep, high fantasy setting. The 14 gods all at each other's throats, the 9 distinct realms swirling in colorful magics, and just the crazy cool factions all starting at epic level. It's just fun. I personally go for the low magic stuff myself, but seeing high fantasy done this well is pretty inspiring. Best in class artwork. The illustrations shown in this video all come from the book, and the art speaks for itself. The visuals really sell the fantasy here. Rules are straightforward. This game is low crunch. There's still some complexity when it comes to skills and some of the spells, but on the whole, the mechanics are just very approachable. All the minis. I've said this about other Warhammer RPGs that I've reviewed, and I'll say it again. The minis. Yeah, they're Games Workshop, so they're pricey, but they are exactly what's in the book. And what's in the book is some very unique, wicked stuff. I guess in a nutshell, this game is beautiful and playable and designed for fast, bright-burning one-shots. You're going to have to get under the hood and reconnect a bunch of wires to get it to play like Warhammer Fantasy or something toned down and extended across lots of sessions though. Also, the setting lore runs deep. This is a blessing and a curse. If you and the folks at your table are already read in or are willing to put in a little bit of time to read, then it's awesome. If not, then you can still play the game, but you will be bypassing one of its marquee features, the setting itself. And if you really want to fry your brain on Age of Sigmar lore, pick up one of the Wargame's so-called battle tomes. They're full of the same awesome art and layout, but have more lore on any given faction than could even be considered healthy. And as always, thanks for watching. This is Dave, signing off. See ya.